Baba Sahib warned about the cult of personality. He warned that we should beware of leaders who become so large in the public imagination that you cannot criticize them, you cannot speak against them. This is a very definite danger, and you can see it clearly in this country. Your whole way of looking at life. But we would make a mistake if we assume that what the US is doing today under Trump is simply the product of one irrational man. Behind this man, behind this group like RSS, behind this party like BJP, you have again very powerful economic, financial forces to authoritarianism in one form or the other. And you can see this in India, you can see this in Europe, you can see this in the United States, where primarily if I talk of at least these two countries that I know well, and where Dr. Ambedkar spent a lot of time in the US, and of course he viewed India like the back of his hand. Here you have a situation where money power drives politics in both the US and India. And what we see today as simply the ravings of an irrational man. I mean, which leader can take pride in taking the Nobel Prize that somebody else has won, and imagine that he's got some great thing? There has to be something a bit wrong with your whole, your whole way of looking at life. But we would make a mistake if we assume that what the US is doing today under Trump is simply the product of one irrational man. Certain social, economic forces brought into power. There is a wider institutional impetus centered around very definite, very concrete business interests, financial interests, which are being pushed, which is benefiting and which is backing Trump. And similarly in India today, what we know as Hindutva, which is a political movement aimed at gutting the constitution, aimed at eroding the rights of ordinary Indians, but particularly of minorities, of the Dalit Bahujan masses, of women, of Adivasis. This is not simply the product of one man like Modi or one group like RSS. Behind this man, behind this group like RSS, behind this party like BJP, you have again very powerful economic, financial forces. And a lot of what the government is doing is essentially to further the interest of these powerful economic and financial forces. So this, our understanding of society, we have to be very clear that we are not dealing with a threat posed by one man, a threat posed by, of course, Baba Sahib warned about the cult of personality. He warned that we should beware of leaders who become so large in the public imagination that you cannot criticize them, you cannot speak against them. This is a very definite danger, and you can see it clearly in this country. At least in the US, you have comedians who are criticizing and making fun of Trump every day. Here, comedians who do that would run the risk of having a case filed against them, of some kind of criminal proceedings being launched, of their shows getting cancelled, and so on and so forth. But the fact is that beyond that cult of the individual, beyond that one leader is a system. And I think that what Baba Sahib understood was something that many societies, and I think certainly this is true in the US and India today, what we have learned rather too late, that fascism does not always arrive with a big announcement. Fascism does not always arise in one step. This is not, it may be sometimes. So Mussolini marches to Rome and captures power. But if you compare the Mussolini of 1923 with what Italian fascism eventually becomes, or if you compare the Germany of 1933 when Hitler first won his election with what Germany eventually becomes, you have a continuous process where laws are introduced, attitudes are changed, public culture is molded, civilizational values are undermined. There is a whole process which takes a certain amount of time, which should serve as a warning to people like us that look, If we don't resist now, tomorrow will be too late. And we are so caught up in making, so we look at fascism as a finished product. You look at Germany of 1939, you look at Chile of General Pinochet, and you say, well, this is not what Trump has done, this is not what India is, and you are missing the signs that fascism is a process. It slowly creeps up upon you, it is steady erosion, steady eating out of the inner values of all the safeguards of society, and that when it enters the stage of history, the scene of history, it enters wearing the language of order, it enters wearing the language of national unity, it enters wearing the clothes of tradition, of militarism, and of so-called popular will. But it feeds on social hierarchies, and it feeds on the fear of people who are not supposedly not like us, and on the promise of national regeneration. It also, once it takes root, once we drop our guard, once we say, chalo, today they are only saying that let us stop eating meat, let us not allow the sale of meat in some towns for some days, or let us have various other restrictions, let us have a NRC, what does it matter? If you don't recognize what is happening, how the constitution is being undermined, brick by brick.
So hot. So refreshing.
Imagine expanding your business to London while setting up a family office in Singapore and investing in Dubai. With Standard Chartered, you can grow your wealth anywhere, right now. Now's your time for wealth.
Putting on the table the demand that you have to have annihilation of caste. This evil of caste, if we were to pick up one thing that was struck a chord with millions of people, it was this. But for him, for Baba Sahib, caste was not simply a question of social injustice. Caste was also profoundly anti-democratic as a system. It was one that normalized inequality. It discouraged fraternity. And most importantly, it trained the society to accept and be comfortable with graded hierarchies. A society comfortable with permanent inequality, Ambedkar believed, is a society that is dangerously susceptible to authoritarianism. So there is an organic link between the need for the annihilation of caste and for defending democracy, extending democracy, and ensuring that authoritarianism does not take root. And for him, democracy was not simply a form of government, but a mode of living in which citizens recognize each other as equals, despite differences of belief, birth, or background. Without this moral foundation, constitutions can be amended, as we have seen, laws can be weaponized, as we have seen, whether it's UAPA or whether it is Citizenship Amendment Act or various other laws that are being passed, and popular majorities can be used to undermine the spirit of constitutional republicanism and become instruments of exclusion. One of the panels, one of the sessions in the two-day seminar is focusing on what I believe to be a very, very important aspect of today's political reality in India, which is the role of the constitution as an instrument for opposing fascism. And in contemporary India, it's not uncommon to have the constitution invoked in a ceremonial sense. How often have we heard Narendra Modi or I think various other leaders say constitution is like a Gita, it's the holy book of India. So there is a way in which you reduce the constitution into some kind of a holy book, which is purely symbolic. But Ambedkar did not design the constitution to be some kind of sterile object of worship. For him, it was a living document. It was an object of restraint and it was an object of empowerment. It was designed to restrain those who would have executive power and to make sure that they do not abuse that authority, do not abuse that power, to oppress the individual, to subject the individual, and to subject collectives to tyranny of one kind or the other. But it was also meant as a document of empowerment. So it spoke of certain fundamental rights, but we have seen through the struggle of masses, the successive governments and judicial authorities being forced to, after all, right to life today has come to mean right to privacy. It has come to mean right to information. These rights did not spring from heavens. They were the product of mass mobilizations. These were the product of people across India asserting that they have these rights, fighting for them, the right to education, for example. These are rights which people have asserted and which find due recognition in concrete laws after a certain period of time. That is what I mean when I say Constitution also as a document that empowers people. It was not meant to freeze in one place a certain set of rights, but these were always to be seen as something enabling. So when the Constitution speaks of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, that is meant, you ask freedom of speech for what? Freedom of assembly for what? Well, people can get together, speak and assemble for any reason. But in the field of rights, the assumption is that people speak, people study, people agitate, people associate, people build organizations, people fight, and they fight for rights that we perhaps did not see the importance of 40, 50, 60 years ago, but which today are an absolutely essential part of the right to life. So this idea of the Constitution being a living document, a document of restraint on the one hand, for those who are in power, and a document of empowerment on the other, was central to his conception of the Constitution. And today, when citizens, and we've seen over the last 6 centuries, ever since the struggle against the Citizenship Amendment Act began in a way, people holding the Constitution in the never saw this earlier in mass protests, whether of farmers or other sections of society. Today, the Constitution, people say this is our document. This empowers me. This is meant to restrain you. And this is something which, I think of all the things that would have pleased Baba Sahib if we were to look at what is happening in India today. It would be to see how people have adopted this document as their own, as part of the living process of their own struggle, rather than reducing it to some kind of holy book, which is what the government or the politicians of the day believe. Friends, I want to say a few words also about the importance of theatre, culture and intellectual life, because our seminar is part of a glorious tradition in Karnataka of the whole Maharupi Theatre Festival, the whole theatre movement in this state. Now, theatre has traditionally and historically functioned as a safe resistance against authoritarian controls. It exposes power to scrutiny. It humanizes those who are invisible. It refuses the simplifications that the artistic thinking thrives on. So in aligning Baba Sahib Ambedkar with Maharupi, I think Rangayana is making a very, very important statement. That culture is not, again, something that you can reduce to an ornament of democracy. Culture is one of the ways we have of safeguarding democracy. So when we come up with the idea of citizen time, we do so with a great sense of responsibility. This is our work as cultural workers, as academic people, as intellectuals, as academics, of using culture as a tool, as a weapon, to defend what is important, what is sacred for the broad masses of people, which is our democracy. In the same way, Baba Sahib Ambedkar must not be turned into a neutral national icon stripped of his radicalism. We see this, it's always happened in the past. Of course, for the longest time, Baba Sahib Ambedkar was ignored. So he was not taught. If you grew up in the 70s or 80s, before the big Dalit Bahujan upsurge, Baba Sahib Ambedkar did not figure as a prominent person in school textbooks. So for ages, he and his contribution was ignored. Once the masses, Dalit Bahujan masses, struggled, established their stake, reinforced their stake, then claimed the fact that they cannot be, that they are central to what is India today, you saw then a process of paying lip service to Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And we see this now most clearly in the current world where it's not common to have prime ministers or top leaders speak about Dr. Ambedkar in very glowing terms. But this is again part of that same process of taking an important thinker, an organic intellectual, somebody who saw the purpose of his life and work as that of empowering people, of struggling, of opposing caste, fighting for democracy, reducing that person into something which is simply a marketing icon, a symbol. And in my view, we should reject this notion that you can convert Dr. Ambedkar simply into some kind of symbol. The fact is that his critique of the Hindu social order, his warnings about majoritarianism, his warnings against cult of personality, his warnings about how democracy will be undermined, his insistence on the reason, his insistence on dissent, as measured, for example, when he burns a copy of the Manusmriti, or when he adopts Buddhism. Today, it's strange. Leaders who praise Ambedkar, they file cases. There was a case of a young woman who burned Manusmriti as part of a political protest. So you can have praise for Ambedkar on the one hand, but when a young woman inspired by Dr. Ambedkar does something like that, they file a criminal case against her. We saw a few years ago political leaders who took the same oath that Baba Sahib took at Diksha Bhumi, criminal cases being filed against them. So trying to completely eviscerate the person and the tradition is something that we must fight against. And we need to remember that the principles that he stood for, the importance of reason and dissent that he promoted is something that we need very much in our day-to-day work. We must also resist the temptation to treat democracy as something that is a one-shot affair, that can be defended once and for all and then we can go home. For him, for Baba Sahib, there was no room for any kind of complacency. He believed that democracy had to be defended every day, in institutions, in public discourse, in classrooms, in courtrooms, in newsrooms, although most newsrooms have given up, but in newsrooms also, and of course in cultural spaces such as this, which is why I think it is so important, this work that Rangayana is doing, and I applaud the organizers of this event, not only for keeping this whole amazing tradition alive, but by giving this focus this year to the multifaceted Ambedkar. Finally, a word about memory. Festivals like Bahrupi are, of course, acts of collective remembrance. But memory, you see, memory can sometimes make us complacent by dulling our senses, or memory can sharpen our sense of responsibility. Dr. Ambedkar did not believe that justice was inevitable. He believed it had to be fought for, intellectually, politically, culturally, and morally. If this seminar succeeds, and I'm sure it will not merely celebrate the life and work of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, it will renew his challenge to us to defend democracy not just from its declared enemies, but from its internal decay. To treat the Constitution not as some kind of ornament or relic, but as a living instrument of resistance. And to recognize that equality, once you compromise on equality, all freedoms are placed at risk. I think that with these words I would like to end. Once again, wishing the seminar great success and congratulating the organizers for organizing the event with this team. Thank you so much.
ಮತ್ತಷ್ಟು ವಿಶೇಷ ವಿಡಿಯೋಗಳನ್ನು ನೋಡಲು ಮತ್ತು ಹೊಸ ವಿಡಿಯೋಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತಿಳಿಯಲು
ಈ ದಿನ .com ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಚಾನೆಲ್ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಮತ್ತು ಬೆಲ್ ಐಕಾನ್ ಕ್ಲಿಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ.